This is a video presentation of the TRJ Refrigeration Superflow touchscreen panel. First of all, you'll notice that there is a mode indicator here. This tells you what mode you are in, whether it's storage, pre-cool, defrost, pre-cool, defrost. The next button here is actually your start-stop button. To start the unit, simply press the button. You'll notice that it turns green. When it's green, it's on. To turn it off, press the button again. The green goes away, indicating that it's off. This next rectangle represents the current temperature that is being sensed at the end of the temperature sensor, which is located inside of the plenum. Right now it is 75, 76 degrees. The smaller number next to it represents the set point, hence the abbreviation SP. So anytime you're looking at this, you'll know what the air temperature is and also what your set point is. This is the case whether you're in storage mode or pre-cool mode. You have the ability to change temperatures whether you are in storage or pre-cool. So when you're in pre-cool mode, you'll notice that the temperature will change. The set point will change if you have it set differently. Another function I'd like to talk about is, although this doesn't look like a button, it is actually a button as well. We can press it anytime we want, and we can look at the temperature on a graph. You can see we start at 25 degrees here and we go up to 100 degrees. Typically you'd see a graph going down like this. So this is temperature, this is time, this is your temperature, and you can move this back and forth if you like to check back sometime. We've got about a 3-hour moving window here, and this allows you to take a look at what the temperature pull down profile looks like. So that's how you get to that. Again, exit back out, takes you back to the home screen. This next area here is an indication of whether or not the cooling valve is turned on or off. You'll notice that there is a short time delay before the cooling valve comes on. When that indicator turns green, it also indicates that the valve is on. When it goes off, it'll say valve off, and of course the valve is off. Anytime you wish to be refrigerating, the valve needs to be on. It will stay on until the current temperature equals to or is less than the set point temperature. The next part of the screen we have here is the alarm status screen. It will tell you whether or not there are any alarms. Obviously you see now that it is green and indicates no alarms. When there is an alarm, the alarm will show up. It will tell you what the alarm is. This fan speed indicator will actually turn into a button and allow you to find out more information about the alarm. We'll go into some different alarms later on. The next buttons are your mode buttons. This is the storage button. You would press that button if you do not want to do any pre-cooling, but you want to maintain a certain temperature within the room. The next button you would press if you want to be operating in pre-cool mode. In pre-cool mode, you would simply press the button. You'll notice that the fan indicator turns from low speed to fan high. It did say fan low, now it says fan high. So basically when you are pre-cooling, the fan is running on high speed. When you're in storage, it runs on low speed. This next mode is pre-cool defrost. Now if you'll notice, when I press this button, you're going to see the cooling valve turn off. The reason for this function is so that if you need to defrost the coil prior to a cooling process, we've given you the ability to use the product heat or the warm air from that is being generated from the product to actually melt frost off of the coil. The time that it stays in this mode prior to switching to pre-cool mode is adjustable in the setup screens, and you'll see that a little later. In the meantime, this indicator does tell you that it's defrosting and that there are, in this case, 2 minutes left. We have this set on a very short time period so that we can do this demonstration. Typically, that setting would be it could be 10 or 15 minutes, but basically long enough to take all of the frost off the coil prior to going into refrigeration. Now you'll notice here, once this defrosting sequence has ended, this will turn to 0 and we'll automatically go from pre-cool defrost mode into pre-cool mode. You'll also notice that over here, the pre-cooling mode minutes indicator tells you how long the system has been operating in pre-cool mode. That will continue to time out, that will continue to time up until the operator switches the unit into storage or the unit is forced from pre-cool to a forced storage mode that we'll go into in a little bit here. Now you'll notice that since that timed out, it automatically, the button indicator went to pre-cool. You'll see up here in the mode window that it is now in pre-cool mode. The cooling valve is on. The fan was on fan high before. It stays on fan high, and now you are refrigerating as well. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the alarm log button. You can press this anytime you want, and this screen gives you an indication of the date, time of any particular alarm, when it occurred, and also what the status is. ACT stands for acknowledged, and the CLD means that it was cleared. So you can go to this screen anytime you like. To exit it, just press the exit button. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the setup button. In order to get into the setup parameters, you'll have to enter a password. In this case, we have one programmed as 1234. Enter. Now you'll see a series of submenus here. The first one we'll talk about is timer setup. The timer setup screen will be different for every unit if you have multiple units in your system. In this particular system, we have one unit. Timer 1 is the solenoid valve on delay in seconds. Timer 2 is the solenoid valve off delay in seconds. The reason for this time delay on and off is so that we don't short cycle the solenoid valve very frequently. We want to make sure that we are turning it on when we're absolutely ready for it to be turned on, and we want it to go off when we're absolutely ready for it to go off. What that translates to is when we've reached a high or low temperature, depending on whether we're turning the valve on or off, we want it to be at that temperature before we actually take action, turning the valve on or off. This next timer, timer 3, is the solenoid valve force off compressor fail delay in seconds. What that is for is basically to protect the compressor. If the compressor has failed for longer than the period that it is set for, in this case 5 seconds, then the solenoid valve will automatically close after the 5-second delay. Typically, you wouldn't want this timer to be set any longer than 60 seconds. Again, the reason for this is to protect the compressor. If the solenoid valve is allowed to stay open while the compressor is not running, there's a likelihood that liquid will flow through the coil, that's liquid refrigerant, will flow through the coil and possibly make its way back to the compressor. And that's a condition that we would like to avoid, so that we avoid damage to the compressor. The next timer, timer 4, is the force to storage mode in seconds. That is a time delay that you are given the ability to change so that once the temperature has been reached to satisfy this mode, the fan will automatically switch from high speed to low speed, indicating that that is the end of the pre-cooling cycle, automatically switching high speed to low speed and saving energy. Now you'll see that it timed out. I'm going to go back into setup again. Again, that was timer setup. We're all done with that. If you have any questions about that, you can always press the timer help button. And here are a series of explanations about basically what I just described. You can exit out of that. Any of these screens, if you need to go back home, you can just keep pressing exit and it'll take you back home. I'm going to go back into setup. The next one we'll talk about is temperature setup. So you have a temperature setup for storage mode and for pre-cool mode. In storage mode, you have a storage temperature set point. Basically, that's the air temperature that you want to maintain. So when the air temperature is above this point, then the solenoid valve will turn on, and when it's below that point, it will turn off. This next setup parameter is the color display change offset. In this case, it's set for 2 degrees. What that means is on the home screen, you'll notice that the temperature, as the temperature changes, the color of the screen will change. I'm going to go back to the home screen for a minute here. Just before I go there, note that we had this set for 2 degrees. So in the scenario that we just discussed, we had the set point at 70 degrees. The color change was set at 2 degrees. So what that means is that everything above, any temperature above 72 degrees, this is going to be red. When it's between 72 and set point, it's going to turn yellow. And when it's at or below set point, it's going to turn blue. The idea behind that is to allow the operator to just sort of glance at the display and know eventually by color how far away or close he is to achieving set point. So we'll go back into the setup screen. Now we have the same sort of a situation here for the pre-cool mode. You have a pre-cool temperature set point, a color display change offset, and also the force to storage set point. The force to storage set point is the temperature at which the fan is forced from high speed to low speed, again indicating the end of the pre-cooling cycle. Now you can change that up or down. Some people like to operate that at some point, maybe a degree or two above. You may even want to make it a degree below. Generally speaking, it should be at or around the same temperature as your pre-cool temperature set point. This next parameter is the solenoid valve temperature difference. Now what this is This is a temperature difference that is added to your set point. So in this situation here, if the storage temperature set point is 72 degrees, then the solenoid valve is going to turn off at or below 70 degrees, and it will turn on at 70 plus 2 degrees or 72 degrees, 72 degrees or greater. This is similar and works in conjunction with the timers that we talked about earlier, the on delay and off delay for the solenoid valve. Again, we don't really want to turn the solenoid valve on and off very quickly or very regularly without being sure that it's time to actually do that. Now you can enter in up to 5 degrees. Typically 2 degrees is a good number. 5 degrees would probably give you too much drift, but it does allow you to give you that does allow that sort of flexibility. Likewise, like all of the other screens, you have a temperature setup help button here, and if you need to refresh your memory regarding any of the temperature setup parameters, you can look at this screen here, and it describes all of what I've explained to you here. You also have the ability to set the time and date. Press this button, and then you can go in and change the current hour, enter in the hour, the minute, seconds if you'd like, a year, month, and day. You should make sure that the time and date are set up properly, primarily for scheduled defrost, which we'll go into in a minute. The next button is the temperature calibrate button. What this does is that it allows you to enter corrections for the air temperature being sensed. In certain installations, the wiring distance between the control panel and the temperature sensor will be so great that there will be minor differences in the actual temperature versus what you see on the screen here. So this allows you to make changes if you need to, at least slight changes. You can see raw temp is basically what is being sensed. Let's go back here. Raw temperature is the uncorrected value. This is the calibrated value. You can see that we've already got a correction value of 1.0 degrees just for this demonstration. So that's why this is 1 degree higher than that temperature there. Now I can go back in and change this to 0, and you'll see that the two temperatures are equal. If you have any questions regarding temperature calibration, you can always go to the help button, and this goes into all of what I've just talked about. It also goes through some calibration procedures if you need to do that. Exit back here. You can change the password if you need to change the password for any reason. This is the button that you would go to. I'm going to exit out of that. The next button we're going to talk about is the defrost button. This is the defrost setup screen. You'll notice that there are 6 possible defrost times that you can enter in here, and to change the time you simply press the button, enter the hour in military time. Let's say it's 2 o'clock, that'd be 1400 hours, and you want to do it at 1430, and you want to do it for 15 minutes. That will automatically put the unit into an air defrost at 2:30 in the afternoon for 15 minutes, as long as you have this enabled. So you'll see that you can go through and enable any of these you like, or disable them as you like, and then once you have set all of these up, leave them either enabled or disabled. That would allow you to not have to set new times. You can simply just enable and disable. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the force defrost button. You'll notice here this button, when I push it, it will automatically put the unit into an air defrost mode, and that can only occur in storage mode. You'll see this right here. It says storage mode only. At this time, when I press this button, the unit is going to go into a forced defrost for 2 minutes. Now we can change this time to anything we like. Typically 15 minutes would be a good number, so we can change that. Now when I press forced defrost, you'll see that we get an indicator down here saying unit A is defrosting, and also another button pops up here that says defrost cancel. This allows you to cancel a defrost if you should decide to cancel it for any reason at all. You simply press that button, and we'll come back to that in a second. I'm going to exit back to the home screen here so you can see what's going on. You can see we're in a manual defrost mode. This is a timer that is counting the defrost sequence down. We started at 15 minutes. That'll go down to 0. When it goes down to 0, it'll go back into normal refrigeration again. So now if I wanted to cancel that defrost, I could come back here and cancel the defrost, and you can see that it went away, and in a few seconds here you'll see this valve turn back on. There we go. We're in storage mode. Fan is on low speed. The cooling valve is on, so we're back in refrigeration again. Go back into the defrost setup screen here, where you can also adjust the pre-cool defrost period. Right now you can see it's set for 2 minutes, but typically that is going to be set for something like 15 or 20 minutes, or as long as is required to take all of the frost off the coil. The idea behind this is to use the heat from the product while you're doing some cooling using that warm air that's created by the heat in the product to actually take frost off the coil. That way you can start your cooling process, and while you're using the warm air, you're taking the frost off the coil. Once that timer has expired, you will go back into refrigeration mode. The next button I'd like to talk about is the defrost warning timer. Right now you can see it's set for 4 hours, and that can be changed to up to 24 hours. The function of this button is to allow the operator an adjustable time before he gets a warning that an air defrost has not occurred. The idea behind this is that if the unit has been running in a storage mode for an extended period of time, in this case we have it set for 4 hours, then a warning will pop up on the home screen saying that there is a defrost warning, and something should be done about it. The action to that warning will be to put the unit into a defrost, or if you feel that 4 hours is too soon of a warning because there is no frost on the coil after a 4-hour period, which may be the case in some situations where the temperatures are running, say, 45 to 50 degree air temperatures, you may not get as much or very little frost on the coil, so you may want to extend that time to 20 hours or any time you like. Again, it's important to keep an eye on the condition of the cooling coil to make sure that frosting is not occurring excessively. Excessive frost will cause the coil to operate inefficiently and won't refrigerate as well, and it will affect cooling times as well. Now you see here we also have a defrost help button, so if you have to be refreshed about any of the functions that we just talked about, then you can always go to that screen and you'll get an explanation there. Now I'd like to talk about is a typical pre-cooling cycle. You'll notice that when the unit first turns on that it defaults in storage mode, so you'll see storage indicated here and the storage button will be lit. Nothing starts until you actually press the start button here. You see that it turns green. We're still in storage mode. you would typically already have the product loaded up and the tarps pulled down at this stage of the game. And then you'll notice in storage mode, actually we're running the fan in low speed. Now I'm going to press pre-cool. You'll see that we get a pre-cool indicator here in the mode box. The fan is now in high speed. We're in pre-cool mode. Now, as I mentioned before, this temperature here indicates the air temperature, the temperature of the air going onto the cooling coil. And this temperature here, 45.0, is the set point, the temperature set point that the system is going to try to maintain. Obviously, we're above set point right now. The air temperature is 62 degrees. The cooling valve is on, and we're in pre-cool mode. Now I'm going to drop the temperature here, and you're going to notice that once we get below 50 degrees, that red is going to turn to yellow, indicating that we're within 5 degrees of set point. There we go there. Okay. So now as we approach, you can see as it goes up above 50, it turns red again. This just serves as a visual indicator so that as your operators are looking at the screen, they don't really have to pay attention to numbers so much. They can look at that color, and once they see it turn to yellow, they'll know that they're within 5 degrees of set point. Now I'm going to continue to drop the temperature. And you'll see once we get below 45 degrees, that yellow is going to turn to blue. There we go. So that way the operator knows you're at or below set point. The cooling valve is just turned off since we've reached set point. And now you're going to see that it's going through a transition right now where the high-speed fan has been turned off because you've reached the set point of 45 degrees. Now the fan has switched into a forced storage mode. You can see that the pre-cool button is no longer lit, but the storage button is. Again, we're indicating forced storage, and the fan has gone into low speed. This is an energy-saving feature. And it also is an indication that the pre-cooling cycle should be complete. Now at this point, if you wanted it to stay in storage mode, you can press the storage button and see that it just goes into storage and stays in that mode. And it'll try and control an air temperature of 45 degrees in this scenario. You would typically go ahead and load more product again and go through the same process, basically pressing the pre-cool button. The high-speed fan turns on again, pulls down to the pre-cool air temperature set point, automatically switches the fan from high speed to low speed, and then your cooling process should be complete.